Good afternoon, everyone. If I can ask you to please take your seats so that we can get started. It's quite a full event that we have on today, a lot to get through, and we want to leave as much time as possible as well for your questions once the panellists have spoken. I'd like to welcome you all to a Queensland Small Business Week event here at The Edge. My name's Karina Carvalho, and I'll be your MC for today. I'm new to Queensland, so if you don't know who I am, I'll just explain very quickly that I present the ABC News here in Queensland. Before that, I was in Melbourne presenting ABC News Breakfast, which was a national program, so some of you may know me from that. Before that, I was in Perth with the ABC as the 7pm news presenter there for 4 years. So that's a little bit about me, but what we want to know about is Queensland Small Business Week. And today is, I think we're into the third day of the week, so it started on Wednesday. It also celebrates the contribution that small business has made to this fantastic state. And this week is an opportunity to recognise not only the efforts of small business owners, but also the many employees who've worked to help them succeed. So thank you for joining us here today, in particular to learn more about becoming a high-growth startup. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place and pay our respects to the elders past and present. This afternoon's event is also available via webinar, and we have more than 20 participants logging in for the webinar throughout the state, so we welcome you. And in addition, we welcome the Mackay office of the department, which is hosting a networking event and watching us live from the Mackay Library. A big welcome to you. It just goes to show how far technology's come that you can do all these regional hookups. So building a startup with ambitions for scale means finding the right support, and today we hope this event will provide you with the support that you need. I would now like to call on the Minister for Tourism, Major Events and the Commonwealth Games, and of course Small Business, the Honourable Jan Stuckey MP, to the stage for the official welcome.
Thank you so much, and may I say it is an absolute joy to watch the ABC News and to see you present. So you have a fan here, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. Good afternoon, it is already. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And could I also respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet, the elders who are with us today and those who've passed. Could I also acknowledge Mr Stephen Tate, who's the Chief Executive Officer, Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland, a very important partner with this government on a number of great initiatives. Could I also acknowledge Lee Angus, the Program Director of ILAB Accelerator, Rick Chen, the co-founder of Possible Proprietary Limited. It's always, you want to say puzzle there, with that Z in it. Jacinta Caithness, partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers Australia, my Director General, Dr Richard Eden, friends, small business owners and would-be one and all. It is terrific to be here at the Edge webinar and the live event entitled Becoming a High-Growth Startup as part of our Queensland Small Business Week celebrations. I really hope that you'll find the webinar not only interesting but also interactive and gain some terrific information about becoming a high-growth startup. Sounds quite exotic, doesn't it? Last financial year, my department delivered 15 interactive business-related webinars, which attracted 1,570 participants. So I encourage everyone here to participate in future webinars. If you'd like to find out about some of those webinars that we've already held, all of the recordings are available via our Business and Industry Portal, or BIP as we call it, at www.qld.gov.au/business. Before I speak a little about the high-growth startups, I would like to briefly outline what initiatives that we have undertaken as your state government to support our goal of reducing unemployment to 4% and cutting red tape by 20% by the year 2018, which just happens to be the year the Commonwealth Games are coming as well. Your state government has worked very hard over the last 12 months to implement the following promises to small business. The first one was to pay all bills from suppliers to government up to $1 million within 30 days, to expand the payroll tax exemption threshold, to establish the Skills and Training Task Force to reform the skills and training system, to scrap Labor's useless sustainability declaration forms, and to reinstate the principal place of residence stamp duty concession, to also cut green tape by passing the Environmental Protection Green Tape Reduction Bill, to repeal Labor's industry waste levy, to create a department in government with specific responsibility for tourism and small business, to rein in the government spending and stop squandering taxpayers' money, and to better consult with small business through the Queensland Small Business Advisory Council, which I chair. I'm really proud to be able to say that we've delivered on every single one of those commitments within our first 12 months. And there are many, many more commitments to come. The Newman government, ladies and gentlemen, is unashamedly pro-small business, and we are committed to growing a very strong and prosperous small business sector. Like you, we understand that small business is the backbone of our economy and underpins it along with our 4 pillars of tourism, construction, mining and agriculture. The statistics, though, do speak for themselves. There's about 412,000 small businesses here in Queensland, and they represent 96% of all businesses and employ almost half of all private sector workers. I come from a small business background, so did my father and his father before him. Before entering politics, I ran my own successful communications consultancy, consulting to businesses on the Gold Coast for more than 15 years. Mostly I consulted to major resorts and tourism operators. Today I am still the director of a small medical practice in Coolangatta with my husband. Many of my government colleagues come from small business backgrounds. I guess you could say we get small business. We have a genuine passion for and intimate knowledge of small businesses. We understand the challenges and the need for support, guidance and coaching at various times. We recognise that Queensland small businesses are the engine room for innovation, employment and economic progress. We also recognise that high-growth start-up businesses play an important part in growing our economy. Becoming a high-growth start-up is difficult, and we want to help yours to survive. Around 60,000 new businesses are established in Queensland each year. However, the stark reality is that after just 3 years, only about half of those will still be operating. Sounds a bit like politicians. That's not in the script, is it? The businesses who do survive go on to create more jobs, generate a greater economic impact, and have the potential to give back to the community. Very soon you'll be hearing from high-growth startup entrepreneur Rick Chen, but I will briefly, if I may, touch on Rick's story. Rick co-founded Australia's first crowdfunding platform, Possible, in 2010, a platform allowing creative individuals, groups and organisations to raise funds online. Rick had a unique business idea that quickly went from being an unwritten thought to one of the major crowdfunding sites around the world and has helped dozens of creative projects get off the ground. Rick took the risk and put everything on the line to pursue his passion for technology and helping others. And I would really like to extend my sincere congratulations to Rick on his success, and I'm sure you would join me in doing that. The breadth and depth of startups and angel investors is growing in Australia. There are abundant opportunities to create high-growth businesses in Queensland, and it's imperative that startups find the right information and support from the beginning. This will help them get through the post-seed stage, or valley of death, as it is popularly referred to also maintain their stamina and successfully manage growth. Right here in Queensland, we have world-class business and innovation incubators with expert advisors and mentors that are supported by our own BIP. My department's new Look BIP successfully acts as the government's one-stop shop for business-to-government services, delivering a range of tools to assist business from inception all the way through to expansion and on to export. With more than 600 business customer service pathways, the BIP helps high-growth startups to establish and manage their businesses, including developing the right skills, building capacity, connecting to ideas and new technologies, accessing new markets, and promoting services. I'm very pleased to say that over the last 2 years, our BIP has saved Queensland businesses over $250 million in time and money savings. In addition to growing our online services, the Queensland Government is giving small business a serious burst of energy in other ways. In May, I'm very proud to say we launched the Queensland Small Business Strategy and Action Plan from 2013 to 2015. It is a whole-of-government framework that provides a planned and coordinated approach to address challenges and set the economic conditions for business success. This is the very first coordinated plan for small business in many, many years, and the government is committed to working with the business community and our industry partners to secure the future prosperity of small business in our state. There are 5 priorities in our plan, and there's 32 actions that will be delivered over the next 2 years, all of them focused on building profitable, innovative and resilient small businesses. The priorities are to lower unemployment, make it easier to do business, increase the opportunities, build stronger business-to-government engagement and maximise business potential. We're also harnessing the future and encouraging small businesses to focus greater attention on the digital economy and the opportunities it presents. We want our businesses to become more efficient, innovative, productive and competitive, to be able to access information, new ideas and new markets around Australia and the rest of the world. Our highly successful Mentoring for Growth program is just one way that we are assisting high-growth startups. The Mentoring for Growth program is one of the 32 actions in our plan and connects businesses with industry mentors. The program has a network of over 800 volunteer business mentors and professionals who assist businesses address their growth opportunities and, of course, their challenges, by helping businesses take the next step to grow and expand. The Mentoring for Recovery program evolved from the success of these all-year-round programs to help business recover from natural disasters. Another action in our strategy and action plan is the inaugural Queensland Small Business Week, which we are taking part in today. Today, as you've heard already, marks day 3 of our Small Business Week, which celebrates the contribution small business makes to the Queensland economy, and it's devoted to helping small business have a really big future. A range of activities dedicated to small business are on offer throughout the week and throughout the state to give people an opportunity to learn about starting or growing a business. It has been a very busy week so far, with COSBOA's 11th National Small Business Summit held in Brisbane over the last 2 days. In fact, there's 80 events planned throughout Queensland Small Business Week to help give our small businesses the recognition they deserve. And as well as today's webinar, which the government has been very pleased to sponsor and assist, we are holding Buy Locally Saturday tomorrow to encourage people to support their local small businesses right across this great state of ours. Buy Locally Saturday expands on the successful Think Queensland Buy Locally campaign, which started in March this year in partnership with CCIQ, to encourage consumers to choose local products and services over others. I encourage everybody here today to spend tomorrow out supporting your local small businesses and buying locally. You can find more information on our BIP. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for inviting me along today. It really is a pleasure to be your small business minister. And as you can see, your government is working hard to support you and small business and deliver a very strong 4-pillar economy. And let's always remember, Queensland, it's a great state, with great opportunity, and there's plenty for us all.
Thank you very much to the Minister. I think her speech now sets the tone for what should be a very enjoyable discussion. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our panellists, Lee Angus, the Program Director for ILAB Accelerator. Lee has more than 15 years' experience in marketing and business development for IT companies in Argentina, Israel and Australia. Lee is also the co-founder of WizzyBoard, a startup developing technology for augmenting online games and toys to touchscreen devices. And last year she became the Program Director of ILAB Accelerator. Our next panellist is Stephen Tate, Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland. He's been a very busy person this week, much like the Minister. Stephen is a commercially focused business leader with a proven track record in developing organisations through periods of change in competitive business environments. So please welcome Stephen. Jacinta Caithness is a Senior Manager at PwC and Principal of Indy One Consulting. Jacinta has more than 15 years' experience in working within the retail and consumer industry and has worked with some of Australia's leading brands, including Boost Juice and Kiki K. Jacinta's achievements include AFR Boss Young Executive of the Year and Telstra Young Businesswoman of the Year. Welcome, Jacinta. And our last panellist, who's already been mentioned, Rick Chen, is the co-founder of Possible Proprietary Limited. Rick co-founded Australia's first crowdfunding platform, Possible, in 2010. It's gone on to become the third largest crowdfunding platform worldwide and raised more than $11 million for the industry. Rick, this year, was selected by the Australian newspaper as one of the top 20 Australians to watch out for in 2013. A great honour indeed. Welcome to Rick. If you'd like to just acknowledge our panellists, please. So the format for this afternoon is that each of the panellists will give a short presentation on what they see as the important factors when becoming a high-growth startup. So I'd like to welcome our first panellist, Lee Angus.
Thank you very much. We were just talking a little bit before that it's a tough gig to talk about how you make a high growth in about 5 to 8 minutes, so I'll try and do my best. I wanted to talk about 3 things, if I may. Firstly, about access to experience and skills and knowledge, ideation and the validation of a market, and then the third one is obviously funding and capital. So just to very quickly talk a little bit about ILAB, but to frame it in the context of language, there's some language used in terms of organisations that support founders or entrepreneurs at very early stage. You may have heard of incubators, accelerators or co-working spaces. I just wanted to quickly define those a little bit in my view, just because sometimes they get a little bit mixed up, but it's also a good way to understand where you can go for support, services and funding. So co-working spaces tend to be a number of entrepreneurs coming together in an environment where they can share ideas but concentrating on their own businesses. So the local one here in Brisbane, River City Labs, another one down in Sydney, Fishburners, York Butter Factory down in Melbourne, Silicon Lakes at the Gold Coast. These are lovely environments for you to be able to kind of mix and mingle with colleagues or like-minded people. Generally, you'll pay for a desk or a couple of desks, depending on how much, what your needs are as a business. Incubators tend to be a little bit more associated to universities. So there's support and services, coaching, mentors, entrepreneurs in residence that are there for sometimes businesses that are being spun out of universities, might have a deeper technology, or may have a team of employees or a founding team that's maybe more than 1 or 2 people. The third one is accelerators, and some of you might be familiar with those, the most popular being perhaps Y Combinator in the States, where these are very intensive programs to be able to take new ideas or high-performing teams through a very accelerated product build in short amounts of time. And most tend to be around 3 months, some will do 4 or 5 months. Now, just in context, ILAB is an incubator and accelerator. So we run a program where we will seed fund up to $20,000 for founders or entrepreneurs who have a concept or an idea that they would like to put out to the market. And then also have follow-on funding, of which we're just about to raise or finish a raising of $1.5 million for some of those ideas that have been tested in the market to see that they have the opportunity to grow, and then have some capital waiting for them to be injected into those ideas. ILAB is predominantly tech-enabled. So that means we'll work with a lot of tech people who like to build stuff. What we do is we then try to encourage them to build stuff that matters in terms of the market. Sometimes we'll work with non-tech people who have a very good scientific background or have worked in industry and would like to productize their ideas or their knowledge into web-based or technology-based platforms and content. So again, a little bit about ILAB. We're owned by the University of Queensland and solely funded by Queensland Government, there to support early stage tech-based ideas. So part of being involved with ILAB or River City Labs or Silicon Lakes, these environments really is to access coaches, mentors, experienced people, which I believe is crucial for early stage entrepreneurs to be able to mould their businesses into what looks like a high-performing business. Often we will see people who have kind of worked in a bubble for a little while in their own home or perhaps in a university, and have not really gone out to market to ask the questions, and what am I building? Is it desirable? Is it priced right? Is this something that's going to appeal to a market? So being in an ecosystem or an environment where you have a good source of coaches, business coaches, mentors readily available is a lovely way in early stages to be able to pull yourself out of that bubble at the ideation stage and to really test what you're building has the potential to take in market. First, in a safe environment with coaches, but then secondly, as I mentioned, it's important to put them out into market and start to test those ideas out to market. And coaches, business founders or successful business founders in the past are a really good source of knowledge on how to do that in an appropriate way that supports what you're trying to do, that builds into your product and produces you, I guess, an outcome that is closer to what is likely to fly in the market, not what you believe is going to fly in market. I guess this takes me to the ideation stage, and I wanted to perhaps put it out there that there is a great opportunity now for individuals to create products and services and test those products and services at very low cost. Local platforms such as the crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, which Rick will go into details. There is also, means or platforms for outsourcing work to local organisations, to overseas organisations, to be able to build up what is commonly known as a minimum viable product or a prototype or an early stage concept that you want to put to market. With software, as it is today, it's very easy to build in a light, agile way, which means that you can tweak and tune that product or that prototype as you develop, based on the feedback, based on the input that you're receiving from potential live customers, from the community around you, and from your potential market. So things like Elance and Freelancer, Odesk, software packages or services like LaunchRock enables you a very quick, easy web presence. Google Ads pointing customers onto buzzwords that might attract an audience that you can then start to work with. SurveyMonkey, these are all very cheap, free tools out there that you can use for surveying, asking questions of your market before you've even built something. I guess one of the sad things that we find is that often people will have come into ILAB and have spent significant amount of dollars in building out a prototype of which they haven't even actually put out to market in any way in terms of testing or validating with the likely customers, and only to find it is not desirable, that they've missed the mark altogether. So what we try to do is encourage testing right from the beginning with little or no cost to you. So I guess the other thing I just wanted to point out, which we've noticed as well, which would be interesting, there are a lot of people who will come in and who have worked in industry and see an opportunity, which is great. They know the industry well, they've got a gut feel about it. What we try to then encourage is to test that hypothesis or that gut feeling that they're right. But they're entering into the world of software, and this is quite interesting. A number of people who don't have skills in software misunderstand that software is like an animal, needs to be fed. So the concept of kind of building it and putting it out there, for example, like an app on iTunes, doesn't stop there. It actually becomes a real suck in terms of time and money, in terms of keeping it up to date. So we will often work with founders to understand what the whole cycle looks like with software and not just the initial creation. So that over time they're building a business that they can actually feed the animal and not the animals start to destroy them. Also, I guess another thing I just perhaps wanted to put out there as well is often we will see people who come in and say, I've got a great idea for an app. Now that's a pretty busy world out there in terms of apps. I guess one of the things is apps are not really a sustainable business. Monetizing apps is in many cases very difficult to do. The bulk of them are offered free. There's a very small percentage that takes off and does well. Apps as part of a more comprehensive platform of services and products is a beautiful and sustainable business model. So what we do in ILAB is encourage people to think beyond just the app, to think about multiple products, multiple revenue models that they can make out of their idea. And that will grow over time. They'll introduce new ideas, but to not limit themselves or to think that they will be able to survive off, say, an app going up onto an iTunes. iTunes is a platform, an app is just one product of that. So we're really asking them to think more broadly and deeper about their ideas. Finally, just in terms of funding, there are some great opportunities now in terms of accessing funding from multiple sources. I just wanted to mention a couple of them. Particularly, as I mentioned, in ILAB, we have funding up to $20,000 for new ideas, and there are other accelerators across the East Coast that will do that as well. Taking into account, though, it's highly competitive. But one of the things that we do, I just want to raise, is that we often see people asking for ideas or asking for funding just based on the idea. What I would suggest is really have a clear understanding beyond what just is the idea, really knowing sort of the market and the application. The idea is the 1%. Those that we get involved with really have a clear idea of what the execution will look like over time, how they're going to implement it, how they're going to distribute it out to the market. But there is some great funding available in terms of grants, friends, family, angel investors. I guess all of them, even from Commonwealth grants and local grants, will expect you to clearly understand what the business opportunity is, rather than say just the initial idea. It's how that idea will be deployed over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lee. Now, I just want to remind you that at the end of the presentations from the panellists, we're going to open it up for a Q&A session. So there'll be microphones that will go around the room. So if you want to start thinking about any questions that you might have now in preparation for that, that would be great. As well, we're inviting questions from our participants with us via webinar. And as well, you can ask questions via Twitter, in case you want to do it completely anonymously. Oh, well, not completely anonymously. But next is Stephen Tate, so I'll hand you over to Stephen.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me along to speak today. And in honour, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge the Minister for what is a fantastic initiative and something that the Chamber of Commerce is delighted to be a part of. I think working with a department that's so focused on improving the economy through small business is an absolute pleasure to do so. So thank you very much for inviting us along and also for the event. I have to admit that today it was with a fair degree of trepidation that I was asked to present today. I don't think, if we were to be honest, you would use the words start-up, dynamic, passionate. That Chamber of Commerce are two adjectives that you would probably use. And when you actually look at our organisation and perhaps the perception of it, it's actually quite an interesting topic for us to do, especially when I'm surrounded by people who have got far more experience and actually runs on the board than I have. But actually what I did think was perhaps I could actually talk about some of the experiences that our members have, some of the challenges they've faced. I could put up some interesting statistics, I could talk about some graphs and challenges. But the simple fact is that the most important fact is that small business is absolutely critical for the future economy of Queensland. And as an organisation in the Chamber of Commerce, we have to make sure that we're absolutely relevant to help and support that economy and these people. It's a very fine line between business and community. And the Chamber of Commerce is mandated and is there to support them. And in today's economy, we actually have to make sure we address everybody's concerns. Startups, innovators, high growth, we've got to play in that space. And therefore, actually, as a Chamber of Commerce, we actually had to change as well. You've probably heard of the Chamber of Commerce on a number of fronts. We're absolutely renowned for being in the media. We're there lobbying on behalf of business. We're there talking about what business needs. We're there actually telling people what's wrong with the economy. Actually, the Chamber of Commerce is a phenomenal voice for business because it talks to business. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to see ourselves as being a proactive organisation that just supports business, but actually works with government in a proactive manner to work with them to develop the best possible business environment for the economy. Therefore, we had to go through a significant change. When you actually look at our value proposition, though, if you're seen as just being somebody as a voice, it's kind of hard to be a compelling value proposition for a small business. When times are tough, they're working hard, we need to be seen to be supporting them. And what's the value proposition? So with that in mind, we went through a whole heap of research as an organisation. About 12 months ago, we took the decision that we were actually going to reinvent ourselves and become almost like a high-performance startup. The problem was our startup was 146 years old. And when you actually look at our value proposition and we went through it, we actually said, you know what do we actually provide our members? What sort of support can we give a business? And when we asked people, we didn't really get past the networking part, which is a challenge for us because actually in today's economy, that part's being provided by the digital space, different platforms, different ways of engaging, different ways of having communication. And actually as an organisation, we needed to get into that space. We needed to create an absolutely new value proposition. And the one thing that we actually asked ourselves was, how do we become absolutely essential? Because if you're not essential to a business, a small business, then you're a nice to have. And when we went through the challenges that every small business faced, we thought, what is our portfolio got to look like? What do we actually have to create in order to make us that compelling and easy to do business with? So we took away all the stuff and we actually focused on what our core proposition should be. We wanted to provide advice. We wanted to provide the most comprehensive advice for a business at any stage of its life cycle. We wanted to curate the best possible information. We wanted to provide tools and service that businesses could come to us with. They trusted us. We're 150 years old and we had a huge amount of brand trust. And yes, there's an awful lot of information out there. But what we do is we actually point people to the right information, like BIP, like our trusted partners. We actually want people to make it easy for them to do business. So we saw ourselves as a trusted advisor and curator. We wanted to be seen that when you're facing challenges through that growth cycle, that actually you could phone us. Whether it's employing staff, whether you want to know what the new pay rates are, if you had issues with IR, we just wanted you to be able to phone us. We actually want to create and connect you with people who are like-minded, to share experience, to focus on ways of actually you can get best practice. So we had to move our value proposition into the fact that you're time poor, you've got work environments and pressures that you can't take time out to go somewhere. So like the government, we focus much more on technology delivery now, with webinars and webcasts and workshops that are held online and best practice and best advice. So we've now moved much more to being a supporter. So our role today, in my position today, is actually we are part of that ecosystem that we need to move our business to be supporting you. So whilst we probably can't give you the best advice, because that's something that you guys are fantastic on your products and services, what we can do is we can give you the best advice on all the other elements of running a business that perhaps you would struggle with as you go through business. It clearly doesn't matter that if I've got the best product and the best service and the best advice, if actually you're going through a startup and you have to change the way you do things. As an organisation, we've had to take on board the same dynamics, the same personality, the same drivers that you have. And the fact of the matter is, the one thing that went through our business to its very core is that we were passionate. As an organisation, we're extremely passionate about SMEs. We're extremely passionate about helping them be successful. And so we created a series of values that we built our business around, and we built our staff around. It's a difficult journey taking a business from there to there if there's no real alignment, and it has to reflect who your customers are. And the key words of influence and passion and trust are inherently now built into our business. Therefore, if we can help in any other parts of your business that we are not experts in, it will be around workplace, business planning, IR. We will point you in the right direction. And the third part is we've got to make it at a price that's actually compelling. And so we've had to review all of our pricing, all of our products, and all of our services. So over the last 12 months, it's been a phenomenal change, but if I would say to any organisation, culture is going to help you do that. And surround yourself with people who are far better than you are. Keep your eye on the prize. Make sure that you put yourself in your customer's shoes. And at the end of the day, just remember, it's a long journey and it's hard, and the Chamber of Commerce want there to be there to support you. And if there's anything we can do to help you, then you let us know, and we will alter our product and our service accordingly. And at the end of the day, it's got to be fun. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I'd now like to call to the microphone Jacinta Caithness.
Hello. Get my slides organised. So hello, my name's Jacinta. I'm a Senior Manager at PwC in Melbourne. I work in a division called Private Clients, and our team is better known as the advisory team. Predominantly, we're assisting entrepreneurs achieve their growth objectives. So we range anyone who has an idea from concept stage to someone who may have already experienced a degree of success and wanting to expand, broaden their horizons. So very, very diverse range of industries. My background prior to joining PwC was in industry and predominantly retail. So Boost Juice was where I kind of began my career. I joined there in 2002, and at the time that the stores, there were only 3 stores, and 8 years later I left in 233 stores. So very much an example of having seen an idea at the concept stage and been part of the roller coaster, which is a startup growing into a very successful, now very large business. Oh, sorry. Now, I've been asked to speak to you today about the startup economy, which was a report that PwC were commissioned by Google to conduct an assessment effectively on the state of the Australian startup system and the ecosystem that supports it. The focus of the report was on tech startups. However, in our opinion, a lot of the findings were relevant to small businesses in general. You can see the 3 points there. The key findings were that the growth, obviously, of startups and tech startups particularly is very important to the Australian economy, with the focus being on... Oh, sorry. I apologise. I'll just go back. Oh, I think I might need some assistance. I think I've... Oh. I think I'm good. Yeah, sorry, here we are. So the growth being very important to the Australian economy, with Australia needs to accelerate the use of tech in industry. You can see there's some stats that came from our report in that we believe that the tech startup sector will contribute 4% of GDP and over 500,000 jobs for 2033. very clearly, you can see that there's significant potential for the Australian tech startup and the startup sector in general to be able to underpin the strength of our economy going forward. Now, the tech sector very much focused in our results showed that the IT or information media and tech communication sector were the focus of many tech startups. However, you can see there that, in our opinion, the results of the finding were that there are many other categories into which tech startups can have influence. Finance, insurance, manufacturing and healthcare are some of them, and perhaps with my background predominantly, we can see that retail is certainly an area where tech startups can focus. A huge opportunity for tech startups in that potential is limitless. For in this environment, retailers are having to constantly innovate and are competing from all elements of the matrix, from price, customer service, distribution, stock availability and so on. For us, the real beauty of startups is that they can often define themselves according to the needs of the client. And that is key in that the opportunity, therefore, really is limitless to some degree. The needs, obviously, from the clients are increasingly diverse. Now, the findings, the Startup Economy report, I should say, is available on the internet, but some key findings here, the call to action, our key takeouts were these 5 points. In order to accelerate the growth of the Australian startup economy or the ecosystem, we believe that with the high fear of failure rate, encouraging the culture and the community to really proactively support and encourage ideas from concept stage and then obviously from the incubation stage is absolutely critical. And sharing knowledge from people who have experienced success prior, having support from people, from venture capitalists and so on, is obviously the most important part from our findings. Also to have more entrepreneurs with the right skills. So having a proactive and an encouraging culture on identifying entrepreneurs and then supporting them with the right education is obviously important too. Australian governments have become a significant market for startups, and it has been difficult in the past for startups to achieve or to reach this audience. And Australia needing to really open up these markets to become more open and accessible by startup companies is very important. Venture capitalists I mentioned, so obviously many great ideas obviously come to real fruition with the backing of financial bodies. And the final point there is improving the regulatory environment. So we believe in our findings that we have obviously come some way. However, there's potential for the government to do more in removing barriers which may exist preventing some startup companies from realising their objectives. Outside of the startup economy, PwC run annual publications from, on a variety of areas, and one is the Private Business Barometer Pulse. What is important is that the startup economy obviously was very much focused purely on startups and again geared toward the tech startups. The Private Business Barometer effectively says what kind of environment those startups may be operating in today. So 2013, 300 private businesses were surveyed, and the major findings were as follows. One, there exists a degree of cautious optimism. So businesses obviously are experiencing growth and profit growth and sales growth to some degree, but by and large, the sentiment is that to proceed safely, knowing that there is obviously some concern about how sustainable those profits increases might be. 64% of those businesses, however, did meet or exceed revenue targets. There remains a degree of weak consumer confidence, and we're seeing this particularly in the retail sector with the growth of online and disposable income. Innovation, nothing too surprising there in that the companies that are meeting or exceeding their targets are not focused so much on price, but certainly on product and the innovation of that product and how innovatively you can get to market. And a new normal. Change is something that many people don't enjoy. However, the most successful businesses by and far of the sample survey that we looked at are certainly innovating increasingly within their business and identifying a new normal, new ways of doing things every day. And And just finally, 7 habits of overachieving businesses. So if you're looking at that 64% that were exceeding or meeting or exceeding their revenue targets and profit targets, price is only 1 in 3 see price as driving competition. Innovation, as I've mentioned. Consumer confidence, half see that as a barrier, the other half see it as an opportunity. How they can diversify and produce products that more innovatively to their consumers, and not focusing so much on the dollar, which they can't control, but effectively looking at how they can make their product more attractive to more people. Sorry, this clicker is not my friend. Oh, it really isn't now. I'll tell you anyway. Fourth is investment. So 45% of those who exceed their targets plan to invest in the next year, compared to just 17% that undershot their targets. Asia, expansion is continuing. They are relatively less likely to trade with China or Singapore, and 3 times more likely than previous years to expand into India. People, over half expect to employ more people in the next 12 months, and they expect salaries to increase by approximately 5%. That compares to an increase of 10% by underperforming companies. And training, in terms of training, they're more likely to upskill employees by having them work in different parts of the business than those companies who have undershot or not exceeded their targets or not met their targets. And that is all. Sorry for my bad clicking skill.
Excellent perseverance there, Jacinta. And now I'd like to call Rick Chen, who is our final panellist for today.
To start with, I'd like to thank the Minister and the whole team behind Small Business Week for putting on the event and bringing me all the way down up from Melbourne. And the weather's great here. Melbourne's like raining and miserable, so it's great to get away a bit. So I'm gonna briefly talk about what crowdfunding is and how small business can use crowdfunding as a tool for raising funds and at the same time building an audience base for whatever you do. To start with, hands up if you have never heard the idea of crowdfunding, you're not quite familiar with it at all. Yeah, okay, cool. All right. So crowdfunding, by the definition on Wikipedia, it says a bunch of people put their money together to support one initiative by an individual person or an organization. And this whole process is completely done online. That's the definition of crowdfunding for today. I'll give an example of a live example of what a project on Possible. So this one morning we were sitting in the office drinking our coffee, and these 3 guys rock up in the office in Melbourne. So they come with their iPads and big backpacks, the very nerdy looking guys. So they come and say, hey, we wanted to use your platform to raise funds for a business idea we have. And we wanted to put on a real life zombie shooting game in Melbourne. We're like, okay. And they say, we're gonna go and rent an abandoned hospital or warehouse, and we're gonna put real people in it with makeup as zombies walking around, dripping blood from their face. And then we're gonna build a laser tag gun for players to take, and they're gonna go into the space and they're gonna shoot them. Not really shoot them, but they're gonna, play the game. So they have to follow some sort of, hint and go through the whole space to survive, apparently. So they say we need $10,000 to get the gun prototype built so we can register you have a headshot or leg shots, very nerdy stuff. We were like, well, okay. And instantly we feel very awkward for a second, because I think it's awkward for me. I asked me, am I going to play a game with shooting real people in it? I'm not quite sure about the idea. It sounds kind of strange. Let's say, would you play? It costs $750 for a team of 6 people to play around 1 hour. Were you gonna play? See, that's what I thought. Oh, great. We have one audience that was going to play. Yeah, that's great. So, well, I instantly think, that's kind of awkward. I don't know, if the zombie get too close to me, am I not allowed to sort of punch them? Say, I don't know. It's awkward. And then this guy's campaign went online on Possible. Within probably one day, the $10,000 was raised. And at the end of their 40, 50 days, and they raised $250,000 out of the whole $10,000 target. They managed to put on the whole event in Melbourne purely from the money they raised on Possible. And they got people in groups booking tickets from the US come down for that particular event. That is stunning for me and get me think about, wow, you know, to start with, the zombie community is really big. We shouldn't, you know, underestimate that, even if I'm not a big fan myself. But it's also about the power of when you get a bunch of people with the help of internet, the things, the scale, and the achievement could potentially get. It's very fascinating. That's what we do at Possible. So Possible is a crowdfunding platform where we allow any sort of idea to get on the platform to present into a world audience base. Anyone like your idea, they can pledge cash towards the project. So the way it works is that if you look at this is a local Brisbane project, very successful actually, bringing the street food cat to Australia. They're raising $20,000 to build, actually, I think it's like a dumpling sort of thing. It's a better version of the kind of Thailand style. And so they have a target of $20,000 and they end up raising $21,410. And the way it works is that they come to Possible with an idea and they would do their research. So this is how much money we need to be able to do this. And they come to Possible, they pick a date. We allow maximum of 60 days to run your campaign. So within the 60 days, it's game on. You have to reach your minimum target that you set for yourself. If you don't, you're not going to get any single dollar out of this whole thing at all. This is what we call all or nothing funding model. The reason we use all or nothing funding model is simply because it creates an urgency around things that happen. We have all been to university. Assignment does not get down the day before the deadline. That's the same when you're raising funds online. You give them a good reason about this is what we need to do, but you're going to have a deadline to that, attached to that. So people react towards the deadline. That's also the reason that traditional sector of charity fundraising isn't very effective these days. So they come to Possible, that page is up online, and the time starts ticking. So at that time, they'll be able to go and reach to the potential audiences. For example, those zombie boys, I think what they did is that they reached all the, the zombie community online, offline, those people, and then sort of go and talk to them, potential partner with organization behind it, say, hey, if you're interested in this, have a look. If you support, we give you discount ticket. You get early stage, early bird release. And in return, you offer what we call rewards back to people. Rewards are tiered of products and services you offer back for people's support. For example, you could say if I'm a musician, we have a lot of musician raising funds on Possible. Say if I'm a musician, if you support me for $5, I might decide to credit your name on my album. So same, you can write their name on the card, maybe. And then maybe for $25, I can sign my CD and post to you. And maybe for $250, I could invite you to come to my Saturday night dinner cooked by my dad and mom with the whole team. And we can talk about music, which is actually a real rewards of a musician who was really successful. So rewards, things you can't offer in rewards is financial return. You're not allowed to offer any sort of debt, cash, and money in return. This is not allowed. You can do experience, which work really well. For example, a special event that host. We got Eskimo Joe run a campaign, and the fairly established band, they offered a $4,000 for a barbecue. The boys are gonna rock up in your backyard. You organize a barbecue with 20 of your mates. The band's are gonna come and they're gonna bring sausages and they're gonna cook for you and your mate, and they're gonna play at your backyard. So things like this works really well. This is what we call rewards back. And by the time you run out on your campaign, you're gonna have to hit the minimum 100% funding target. You can go over that, that's not a problem, as much as you can, but you have to hit that minimum target to be able to receive the funds. So Possible has been around for about 3 years, and we started in Sydney in 2010, and then the headquarters at the moment is based in Melbourne, and we also have another team in Sydney, and we have very regular events run in Brisbane, actually just right at the edge. We're going to have another 2 in the next 2 months. We are the third largest crowdfunding platform in the whole world, and started and operated and owned 100% by Australians, and we're very proud of that. And the reason to use Possible for any sort of crowdfunding activity is simply because we're very focused on the Australian market. We deal with Australian dollars, we talk to Australian media. If you have a project, the chance for you to get onto Sydney Morning Herald, Brisbane Times, The Age is much higher compared to get onto New York Times. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. It's fitting to the short kind of time frame we have. I'll be around, so if you have any questions or you want to talk about my personal experience running a startup business, I'm more than happy to chat after this. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think maybe that's not working. That's all from our panelists for the moment, but now we want to open it up to questions. So is there anyone in the room that would like to ask a question? Maybe as you're thinking about it, and we'll get you a microphone in just a moment. Our questions via webinar are not working, so if people are listening to us and they would like to ask a question, they can do it via Twitter, and the handle that they need to use is @businessqldgov, so @businessqldgov, or they can use the hashtag #SmallBizWeek, but biz is B-I-Z. So hashtag #SmallBizWeek, biz is B-I-Z. Do you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Yeah, so Colin Kinner from Spoke Innovation. A question for Rick about crowdfunding. So this is a workshop about high growth startups. You gave a number of examples, but if I understood them correctly, they weren't high growth startups. So are you able to talk about any examples of high growth startups that have raised money on Possible?
Is the mic working? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Possible, like a crowdfunding in general, it's very hard to have a formula for any sort of things like in one go. It's more around how you structure the thing to work for your own. And all successful campaigns on Possible will be listed there. You can go and check them, and you can filter through. We have apps and sort of tech startup use us. And it's all about how to structure the campaign to build your audience based on how to engage with the audience. When you do crowdfunding, it's actually a very long and tiring process, honestly, because you're doing the funding bit as well as building audience together at one go. So it's kind of a hard work, but it's very rewarding. It's hard to kind of generalize a rule or a formula work for everyone, but in general, engaging with people kind of make it work really well.
That didn't answer my question, but maybe if I can rephrase it.
Yeah.
I guess just wanted to understand whether Possible is a sensible place for high growth startups to raise capital. I guess in Australia, there's an increasing trend towards using Kickstarter, which you're obviously going to be familiar with.
Yeah.
But to do that, the companies need to incorporate a US entity, typically a Delaware C Corp. And we're starting to see, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, a lot of the incubators and accelerators are by default encouraging their companies they work with to set up a Delaware C Corp immediately rather than an Australian business. So I guess I'm interested in whether there's scope for some of those businesses to use Possible, because obviously avoiding having to set up a US company in order to raise money on a crowdfunding platform is quite appealing. Could you talk to that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, like using Possible compared to Kickstarter in general, it's that we are very Australian focused. So it's more dependent on your audience. If your audience is more Australian focused, you should definitely consider Possible. But if your audience is more US focused, then it might be good to use a US platform. It really depends on how you kind of see the whole thing. But in general, platforms are just a tool. The impact for you to get onto front page of Possible and Kickstarter is absolutely zero. There's no impact on our own audience. So it's more about a tool, how you use it in the way that you frame it. Yeah.
Hi, mine's also for Rick.
Yep.
If you listed different benefits at certain amounts of money, can you actually cap it at a limit? So say, for example, someone was to pledge $25 for a ticket to an exclusive launch to your event, but obviously you don't want to have hundreds and thousands of people there because that would be unmanageable. Can you do that, like limit the capacity for each different benefit and then add more if you needed to open up different windows of opportunity?
Yeah, you definitely can. So when you set rewards, you can set the rewards to be unlimited or limited. So if it's limited, people, one choosing and one less, available. So when it's gone, you can add more as you go. That's all doable, yes.
Are there any questions maybe for some of the other panelists?
I'll open this up to the whole panel if I could. Can the whole panel give us a definition of what an accelerated startup actually is in terms of their industry, and what tools an accelerated startup needs as opposed to a normal startup where they may not need some of the common business tools available? So
can we just start with Lee?
Yeah, sure. I guess we define startups as early stage businesses that are seeking capital for a quick injection or quick entry into market. Quick is a very loose term. Some of those companies will work 12, 14, 15 months to get their quick entry. I guess that's how we sort of define them.
When we would define, sorry, I don't know if this is working. Does this work? I don't know if we can define actually the tools and specifics on an accelerator. What we've defined ourselves as being the business critical partner in terms of giving advice during their life cycle. So whether it's employing, whether it's actually creating business plans or putting the definition around how you grow a business. But giving actual tools or funding really isn't our element. But what we do is we create an environment where people can share that experience. We recently formed a strand of CCIQ called CCIQ Technology, not because we wanted to be the technology experts, but what we actually found was that most of our technology members actually were struggling with some of the key fundamentals of business, which we could help them with. So we see ourselves being that's part of the value proposition.
Any other questions? I also just wanted to mention that the webinar, the stream is actually working, so if any questions do come via there, we'll try and get to them.
Hello, it's Jacqueline Hodges, More Advisors. I just wanted to ask Jacinta, what is PwC going to do for small entrepreneurial startups, given that, often they're cash poor?
Yeah, it's a good question and one that we do face sometimes. The division where I am in advisory, because the nature of the clients that we come into contact with, we're very cognizant that there's not necessarily the deep pockets that the more established companies do have. Many of the clients that we're working with have potentially turnover that's less than 5 million, so it's a very much focus on appreciating that without the access to capital and cash, there still is a lot of need that they have to be able to expand. So they're often quite clear on their vision and their strategy. But in the event that they're not, that's where our work and our role starts with that particular group. Then discussing based on what their end game might be, what they want to achieve. It may be a short-term project that obviously isn't very intensive from a fee base. It might be a business plan structure, similar to what Stephen would provide. Identifying access to capital, do they have the right team in place? So it could be actually really quite a small project, but in our relationship with the partner, we want to be like a trusted business advisor, working with them alongside them as they continue to grow, because as they do grow, they'll face more challenges that we will obviously be able to either, if not our division, there'll be other divisions within PwC that might be able to assist.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Phil Green from Small Business. This is actually for you, Jacinta. In your research, you found a couple of areas that were impediments. One was the regulatory environment. I was wondering, I know you're not a Queensland-based person, but is there anything particularly that you see as an impediment? Because this government is particularly keen on getting out of the way. So if there's any advice you can give us there, we'd love to hear it. The other is the procurement area. Now, it's a vexed question, and another one we're doing work on in Queensland, but is there anything you've seen that governments are doing that actually is good in the procurement space that we could perhaps adopt in Queensland?
I think the results of our All the Startup Economy report was very much Australia-wide. So certainly what was interesting for us is that every government, state governments do have a different divisions, obviously, within the small business area and the support they do provide to different businesses. The point there on that, what called out from there was the regulatory environment, that there are some barriers in terms of grants or fundings, and really the opportunity for us, as we saw it, is to be able to assist more and more small business operators with either access to funding or even mentor support. So it wouldn't necessarily be having to be funding from the government or in the form of rebates or grants. It's people within the businesses, within the units of the governments that want to be able to obviously assist the people, the small business opportunities.
Are there any more? Oh, just at the front there.
Hi, this is a question for everyone, I guess. Fabienne from Wet Feet. I very much learned from seeing others succeed, and I'd like to know if there's any case studies available of high growth startups that have done it well and what tools they've used, who they've contacted. Maybe this is a suggestion for our minister to have something on the business website as well. Does anyone know of?
Maybe we'll start with Rick on that one, and you can maybe tell us how Possible came about and the crowdfunding that was involved in getting that started up.
Yeah, so you particular after tools?
No, just some case studies, something
examples
I could read, or anyone pretty much we could download online. And I'm thinking just of a PDF document that we could read.
I don't know any one-page sort of PDF, but my own personal experience, I think, for running a startup is that to get plugged in to the industry to start with. Like the environment these days is much better than when we started 3 years ago, although just 3 years, the change is huge. We have a lot of co-working space and incubator, they have events on all the time. Like it normally takes us like a couple months to figure out one thing, and then you go to an event that was done. Like, so I guess plug into the whole thing and learn from others' experience, that kind of work.
Okay.
I think the minister's team was writing that down, so you might get an answer to that online at some stage. Probably only got time for maybe one more question.
Sorry for jumping the gun on all the other people. My name's Paul. I'm from a small startup called Fusion. We're on an accelerator down in Newcastle called Slingshot, which is a lot of fun. Something I've experienced over the years is that, imagine, I'll use a bit of a metaphor to describe this. So if we've just discovered a beautiful piece of land and we're going to build a house on it, right? We wouldn't go straight to a builder or an electrician or a chippy to build that house. We'd go to an architect, right? To try to help us design the best and most beautiful place for that, to take advantage of that piece of land. I think small businesses are like that. But my experience is that there's plenty of people that will give you marketing assistance or accounting assistance or potentially, some IT help. But there's very few people in the market that will help you architect the startup. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what do you guys suggest as a platform or a toolkit for helping to architect, to set the business up as a whole, as opposed to just being the expert in a specific spot?
Maybe Stephen or Lee might be able to answer that.
I think that's a very good question. It's one that's come up over the last 12 months as an organisation, and the subject matter of curation of content and actually advice, of being able to share that and bring it into one space, is something that we're very keen to work on as part of our value proposition, is that we are now trying to build that whole architecture around pulling advice together, whether it's about planning or executing or individual disciplines. So we've actually started to put together a series of educational programs that we deliver over technology to actually come to that space or supply that information. But it is available, and PwC do it, and we all have an opportunity to actually bring that all together. But when it comes to just one point, if you look at a starting spot, apart from ours and your own, if you went to the government's website that generates over 1 million people a year going to that one site just to actually have that initial direction, it's something that is a good start, and it's something that we're trying to work with to actually add value in. So populating content in a one space and creating a dialogue is something that's high up on our agenda. So it's a good question, it comes up a lot.
You're part of Slingshot, so you know the experience of that, of having structured programs, and we're seeing accelerators increasing in Australia because they do exactly that. They put in intensive focus and time to setting up a business right, getting things started correctly right from the beginning, including the intellectual property, including the financing, including the structuring of the business, and then the actual product builds themselves. So I think over time we'll see more accelerators coming into the community. I think that's a good thing. It's a lovely way of bringing people together in a like-minded space, putting them to task intensively with a discipline over a period of time to produce something, as I mentioned, to produce stuff that matters for people and to be able to effectively monetize that stuff.
Yeah, just to fill that back in, the sort of the thread that's been running through, I think this is happening in a lot of accelerators, is the lean, the lean canvas and the lean startup. That seems to be growing in enthusiasm. I don't know if ILAB are getting into that.
We adopt the principles of lean. For those who may not be aware of it, it's a theory that's been well adopted in the Silicon Valley by Eric Ries, who actually helped mentor a couple of local teams here, of really kind of building quick, building agilely, building at low cost, and testing out your theories very early into market quickly before going into complex builds. Most accelerators adopt those principles, but I think those are principles of that have been around for a long time anyway. You know, think carefully about what your market wants, go out and respond to that market, and produce something that matters for them.
Okay, we'll probably have to leave the questions there. You will have an opportunity to speak to the panellists at the end of this, but we need to take a break now for afternoon tea. If we can just give a big round of applause to our panellists, please. Lee, Stephen, Jacinta and Rick. We also have a little gift for each of them to say thank you. There are just some housekeeping matters that we need to go through. First of all, we got some feedback from the live chat. In particular, Rick, they loved your session and what you had to say, so that was some feedback there. As well, Fab Wintle on Twitter was also interested in case studies and examples of successful and unsuccessful startups, so that might be something that can be looked at as well. So we're going to break for afternoon tea now, and for those who have nominated to stay, or if you would like to hang around, there is an opportunity for an hour to sit with an expert or topic host to gain more insights into growing your business. Now, this time is invaluable, so please make the most of this opportunity. There will be four tables for you to sit at and discuss a topic with a host. It commences at 2:30, which is why I'm trying to rush this, so you will get a chance to have a bit of afternoon tea. The topics are Developing Your Business Plan with Mark Pattenberg, CEO at the Innovation Centre Sunshine Coast, Capital Raising Essentials with Anna Rook, the CEO of QUT Creative Enterprises, Building Your Management and Non-Executive Teams, Clive Kay, Development Manager at UQ Business School Executive Education, and Grants with John Monaco, Principal Project Officer at the Department of Tourism, Major Events, Small Business and the Commonwealth Games. In addition to this, there'll also be an Ask an Expert, and those experts will be located in the window bays just outside the auditorium. So the experts this afternoon are Lee Angus, who you heard from ILAB, David Harrison, who's the founder and director at Mammoth Media, Brian Ruddle, who's the Managing Director at Impact Innovation Group. Now, these expert sessions will be more personalised, more like one-on-one sessions, so feel free to ask them anything from marketing to future planning, so that might be an opportunity if you still have questions to get those answered. Now, very importantly, there is a feedback form in your folder. It's really important if you can fill that out, and there's a box in the foyer for you to put it into, so please do that. Would also like to remind you that tomorrow, as the Minister mentioned earlier, is Buy Locally Saturday, so in your folders there's more information about that initiative as well. Before we go, a very big thank you to the Minister for her time today. We know your time's precious, so thank you for staying with us for the entire afternoon. And all the best to all of you here, all the participants, and don't forget to stay around for afternoon tea, and thanks for joining us at Queensland Small Business Week. Thank you.